What's up, good people? Today we're going to talk about if the economy is so good, why does it feel so bad? So what do I mean by this? Well, if you look at what average people say today versus what a lot of economists say today, there's a huge gap between these two things. So if I look at what my fellow economists will say, they'll say, oh, the economy is doing great. Well, many of them will say the economy is doing great, everything's looking pretty good. But the average person is incredibly pessimistic. Super pessimistic about the economy, both over the short term and over the long term. So what's going on here? Why is there this huge gap, right? This disjuncture? Why do we see kind of people saying one thing and economists, and of course, the politicians who take their cues from the economists and the columnists and whatnot who take their cues from them, go on to repeat that line and say, well, hey guys, the economy's great. What's the problem? What are you guys so worried about? Do you know what I mean? What are you guys so upset about? So the reason for this gap, this disjuncture, is that think about what you've gone through over the last couple of years. We are now in what, is called the cost of living crisis. Okay, the average person. This is a global thing. Cost of living crisis. So what is that made of? Cost of living crisis is made of, on the one hand, skyrocketing inflation, right? And on the other hand, falling real incomes. So people are finding it really difficult to make ends meet these days. And they're resorting increasingly to things that should set off alarm signals for better economists, which is that they're using, for example, increasingly using buy now, pay later schemes just to afford the basics, groceries and bills and whatnot. That's not good. Right? That's an alarm signal. And people are resorting to really low-level forms of debt to just pay basic household needs. So cost of living crisis. All right? Now, cost of living crisis is a way for us in the economics world to almost avoid saying a dirty word. Stagflation. Okay? We don't want to say that word because that word is very scary and it's very alarming to a lot of people. But that's basically what's going on here. We have inflation that's ripped through the global economy, and we have stagnation on the other hand. Combine those and you get falling real incomes. Now what's worse is that this inflation is not it's not for luxury goods and designer watches and beach homes or just for that stuff. Disproportionately, this wave of inflation is concentrated in the basics. Things like food, energy, housing costs. Okay, just the basics. When we look at the inflation numbers, for those basics, they're off the charts. And they're still very high. Okay, so in that sense, this cost of living crisis disproportionately is hurting the average person. Right? Because if you're super rich, you're paying much less as a proportion of your total income or wealth for these basics. But if you're just the average person, hey, maybe you're spending 20% of your income on food. Now it's 30%. Big jump. Maybe you were spending, 20%, 30%, 40% of your income on housing costs. Now that's gone way up. So that cost of living crisis is really biting. It's really hurting people, and they've become really pessimistic. Are we going to get out of this crisis? How are we going to get out of it? And what's making them even more pessimistic, I think, is that when they look at some form of recognition, acknowledgement, validation from economists and politicians, and all the guys that take their cues from the economists, they don't get it. So the economists are pretending hey, it's not a big deal. So of course, if you, the average person, kind of sitting there suffering through this terrible cost of living crisis, and you're wondering, how am I going to pay the bills? They just keep going up. And then there are a bunch of economists who are saying, hey, what's the problem, buddy? It's fine. It's no big deal. You're going to be even more pessimistic, right? So you turn around and say, hey, those guys don't seem to know what's going on at all. So why are economists much more bullish, maybe we could say, than the average person? They're very pessimistic. Well, the reason for that is because economists are looking at a different set of numbers, at least a lot of them. This is more true in the States than maybe in Europe, but I think it's true across the world to an extent. So Economists are looking at numbers from the labor market, from the jobs market, okay? And they see kind of unemployment going down from the depths of the pandemic, when, of course, there were all kinds of huge systemic waves of unemployment ripping across the economy, furloughs and, all kinds of stuff. So economists are looking at labor market numbers, and they see unemployment going down. And they say, oh, that's great. That's excellent. That means the economy is doing fantastic. Because what central banks do, of course, is try and keep unemployment to a manageably low level. And so a lot of them think, well, this is great. The job is being done. But they're kind of not looking so much at those other numbers, the stagflationary numbers, the cost of living crisis numbers. Okay, so that's why this disconnect is happening. And what happens as a consequence of that is a lot of economists will say, hey, job growth is doing great. They're not looking at income growth. And if they did, they would see us kind of that picture of falling real incomes and stagnation. And then they should probably ask why. And the reason for that is if we look at the job numbers, the vast majority of all those jobs that are being created are very, very low-end jobs. Right? It's not to say that there's no shame in doing honest work, right? But the vast majority of the jobs the economy is creating are what we call low-wage service work. Right? So hospitality, retail, leisure, this kind of thing. There's no shame in doing it. But it's not the kind of job growth that fuels rising prosperity, that can sustain a healthy middle class. Okay, so those are the reasons for this huge disjuncture. But what you should know is, I think that you should be literate with this, right? And so one of the things I'm here to tell you is that if you're an average person and you're going through this and you're thinking this, you're right. And a lot of the economists are wrong. For the average person, the economy is in terrible shape. And that is why people are so pessimistic, right? It's not like we have, so the statistics are that 80% of people think that their financial situation, their economic situation is improving, and 80% of people think their kids are going to be worse off. So 80% of people think that. Can they really be wrong? Is it some kind of mass delusion? No, there's some substance to it. There's some reality to it. And as economists, we should say, hey guys, okay, we're going to take you seriously. And we're going to try and figure out what's going on here. Why are you so pessimistic? And maybe our optimism needs to come down to earth a little bit. Maybe there's something we're missing. So I think that we should all be literate with that kind of set of facts. And if you're wondering, the economy is so good, why does it feel so bad? I hope that helped. And we'll talk more about it soon. Thank you for listening.